Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Many of us on the twin flame path have found ourselves questioning, at some point, whether the intense connection we felt or are feeling is truly a twin flame relationship or maybe something else entirely. It's a common experience because of the overwhelming intensity of this spiritual journey to start wondering, is this really a twin flame thing, or am I rationalizing a situation that's just not right for me? If you're asking these questions, trust me, you're not the only one. The shocking truth is that while a twin flame journey can feel chaotic and overwhelming, it's fundamentally impossible for it to sustain the patterns of codependence or narcissistic abuse. And there's a precise metaphysical reason why. In fact, what most people interpret as toxicity in their twin flame connection is actually a specific energetic process that narcissistic or codependent relationships can never replicate. Understanding this one critical difference changes everything about how you'll view both dynamics. And none of these relationship dynamics are insignificant or trivial. I remember when I first sensed something unusual in the early stages of my twin flame journey. During the honeymoon love bubble phase, I found myself spiraling into intense emotional darkness, simply because my twin canceled appearing at a group meetup a couple of times, offering vague excuses. The pain felt toxic, obsessive even. What struck me was how these overwhelming feelings were triggered by such ordinary things. A delayed response, a canceled meetup, and all this over someone whose name I barely knew. My reactions were completely disproportionate. I wondered, who was this person who could make me overreact to their every action, triggering something deep within me? At first, I tried to escape it all, hoping to put it behind me because it felt too intense and strange. If she had stayed away then, that would have been the end of it. But she kept returning, triggering me each time. Just when I'd find peace, there she'd be again, effortlessly turning my world upside down. That's when I knew something wasn't quite right. And for many of us on this journey, this is exactly where we find ourselves, overwhelmed and struggling to make sense of it all. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why twin flames and narcissistic relationships might feel similar on the surface, but operate in completely different ways. You'll know how to tell if you're dealing with a narcissistic connection or a genuine twin flame dynamic, and why this difference matters more than most people realize. We'll explore how twin flames fit into the bigger picture of your soul family, including why some soul connections fade with time while others become more intense. You'll discover why certain challenging relationships keep showing up in your life, what they're actually here to reveal to you, and how they prepare you for deeper spiritual revelations. Most importantly, you'll learn to trust your own inner knowing about these connections instead of second-guessing yourself. The answers might surprise you, but they'll help you make sense of experiences that have probably left you confused and questioning everything. But in a strange twist, perhaps the most surprising thing about all these answers is that deep down, you've known them all along. Alright, before we go into everything, I just want to take a quick moment to say welcome and thank you for tuning in. If you're finding this content helpful or insightful, please remember to give us a like and subscribe. It really supports the channel. Let's also take a quick moment to touch on some important concepts, just to make sure we're all on the same page. If you're already familiar with our other videos, feel free to skip ahead to the next section. First off, what exactly are twin flames? While there are many interpretations out there, at their core, twin flames are generally understood as being two individuals who share the same soul. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Everyone technically has a twin flame because it's actually a requirement of how energy manifests in the physical world. There has to be duality for energy to exist here. We go into this much deeper in our video called What are twin flames? But, and this is important, not all twin flames are incarnated in the physical world at the same time. Even when they are, they might not meet in that particular lifetime. So while everyone has a twin flame, not everyone experiences an active twin flame connection. Now, let's quickly clarify some terms we'll be using, because they're pretty important for understanding what's really happening in the twin flame journey. The three main concepts are soul, mind, and ego. First, the soul. When we talk about your soul, we're talking about the true you, a unique droplet or an extension of source energy. Source being what some might call God. Your soul exists in the spiritual realm where there's no separation, only unity and love. Then there's the mind. Your mind or energy field goes far beyond your brain. Think of it as your entire energetic presence, your thoughts, yes, but also your emotions, your intuition, your imagination. Some traditions call this your astral or energy body. It's essentially your interface between the spiritual and physical worlds. And finally, the ego. Now, this isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's simply your physical world identity, your body, your personality, your life story, your relationships, basically everything that makes up your limited and focused earthly experience. Understanding these concepts helps us make sense of what's happening as we move between the physical and spiritual aspects of the twin flame journey. Different teachers might use different terms for these concepts, and that's okay. What matters is tuning into your own inner guidance as you navigate this path. As we go through today's topic, take what resonates with you and don't worry too much about the rest. You might find that something that doesn't click right now makes perfect sense later on. Trust your own inner knowing, that's your soul speaking to you. Alright, now that we're all caught up, let's get into the heart of what we're talking about today. When we talk about twin flames, it's important to remember that we're talking about something real, an objective phenomenon. Twin flames are two people who are energetic expressions of the same stream of consciousness or soul. To understand this, think of all life across the universe as coming from one source. In that sense, we're all connected, but that source splits off into unique branches and extensions. Each branch is like a soul. Right now, we're going to go into some details about what exactly twin flames are to lay the groundwork for the deeper ideas we'll explore later in the video. Imagine a tree. The tree is one whole thing, but it has a trunk that splits into larger branches, which then split into smaller branches, and eventually, you get to the twigs. And at the very end, there are leaves. These individual pieces, the twigs and leaves, are what we're talking about when we discuss souls. Each twig represents an individual stream of consciousness. So, while we're all part of the same big tree, the source, we're also our own unique little branch of it. Now, twin flames happen within these streams of consciousness. Every stream of consciousness has a unique energy signature, and in the physical world, energy always shows up in polarized forms. For example, if there's a front, there has to be a back. It's just how things work. So, with these streams of consciousness, they have two sides, and these sides follow the physical law of equal and opposite forces. That's what twin flames are, two sides of the same soul. You could call it a split soul, two bodies sharing one soul, or however else you want to describe it. The point is, you've got two people who share the same soul. This understanding helps us make sense of what's going on with twin flames. There are certain patterns that tend to play out in predictable ways because this is an objective reality, not something subjective. Of course, each person's experience will be a little different because we all come from different backgrounds, nationalities, and life stories, which add diversity, but the core mechanics stay the same. We talked about this in another video called The 8 Stages of the Twin Flame Journey, where we went into more detail about some of these predictable patterns. The journey usually starts with that initial moment of connection, a kind of metaphysical magnetization. From there, you move into the honeymoon phase, which is often super intense. But this intensity leads to what's called the dark night of the soul. This happens because of the buildup of polarity during the honeymoon phase. It gets too much, and it overwhelms you. After that, you enter what's often called the runner-chaser dynamic, where the two of you keep coming back together, over and over, until you finally align your energy and stabilize, reaching the final stage of union. Now, the details of how this plays out for each person will vary. Your honeymoon phase might be longer or shorter, more intense or less intense. The dark night of the soul might hit you differently depending on your thoughts, emotions, and unique situation. And the runner-chaser dynamic will look different for everyone too. But if you look back, you'll see the same underlying patterns. These patterns aren't just limited to twin flames. They show up in other kinds of relationships too. So it can be tricky to navigate, but recognizing these patterns can help. So that's the basic idea of what twin flames really are. But you're probably wondering how they stack up against other important relationships in your life. I mean, if twin flames are two sides of the same soul, what about those other deep connections we feel? Let's check out the differences. There are two other types of relationships we need to cover in this video: karmic relationships and soulmate relationships. The key difference between these and twin flames is that twin flames involve only one soul, with the two individuals representing the two polarities of that single soul or its energetic field. In contrast, soulmates and karmic relationships involve two distinct people who come from two independent energetic fields. Here's the thing. These narcissistic patterns can only show up in one of these three types of relationships we just talked about. I'll explain exactly why that is as we continue through the video. To revisit the tree analogy, with twin flames, you're dealing with two sides of the same branch. But with soulmates or karmic relationships, you're dealing with two entirely different branches. Each person in these relationships comes from their own distinct soul or extension of source energy, source being what some call God. This distinction means that the dynamics of these relationships will manifest differently. Let's start by looking at the differences between soulmates and karmic relationships. First, we'll focus on karmic relationships. As the name suggests, these relationships revolve around karma, which relates to the reactive nature of life and involves subconscious patterns. These relationships are often framed in terms of healing and learning lessons, and they tend to be quite triggering. They typically involve people you feel drawn to but also clash with, individuals who can simultaneously attract and irritate you deeply. Soulmate relationships, on the other hand, are better understood as dharmic relationships. Dharma refers to a shift out of reactivity and into a more conscious or awakened state of being. These relationships are typically more positive and forward-looking because they operate from a place of greater awareness. One important thing to remember is that whether we're talking about karmic relationships, soulmates, or dharmic connections, these are all relationships that occur within what we might call your soul family or soul cluster, souls that are energetically resonant with yours. In karmic relationships, this resonance is particularly strong, allowing the relationship to endure even when very negative energies are present. Think of it like a vice grip in a workshop. If you want to hammer something into shape, you need something strong enough to hold it steady while you apply pressure. The vice grip keeps things from falling apart or flying everywhere. Similarly, in karmic relationships, the forces holding everything together are incredibly strong. This creates an interesting paradox. If the souls involved weren't so energetically aligned, negative circumstances would simply cause them to part ways without much thought. But because of the deep resonance, even during conflict and toxicity, the connection often pulls you in strongly, sometimes continuing to play out even after separation. When viewed from the soul's perspective, a topic we'll explore later in the video, you begin to see these relationships differently. You realize that these individuals are actually close friends on a soul level, helping you confront and transcend deeply ingrained patterns. Without these intense bonds, it would be much harder to break free from karmic cycles and move toward the more dharmic aspects of your soul's journey. Here's an important disclaimer. Having a strong soul resonance with someone doesn't automatically mean you're meant to have a positive relationship in this lifetime. You should never tolerate prolonged abuse or dangerous situations. Sometimes souls choose to experience an intense, even toxic dynamic with someone specifically to learn from it and then move on, with no expectation of further contact in this lifetime. The key is following your intuition and taking care of yourself, living the life you know is best. This was part of the soul contract, even within karmic relationships. To truly understand this, you need to view these situations from your soul's perspective rather than your ego's. Yeah, it all sounds pretty straightforward when we lay it out like this, but things get really messy and honestly pretty confusing when narcissism and codependency enter the picture. And what we're about to get into might catch you off guard. You might be seeing a pattern in how these relationships work. Each one has its own unique level of energetic closeness, and that determines what can and can't happen within it. This is where a lot of people get stuck in some pretty painful misunderstandings. When we're talking about narcissism and codependent cycles, or any other really dense expressions of fear-based relating dynamics, it's important to know that these kinds of dynamics cannot exist within a twin flame connection. The reason is simple. Twin flames aren't two separate people, they're two sides of the same energy field. Since twin flames share the same energy, there isn't enough energetic space between them to sustain intense fear-based patterns. While karmic relationships have an energetic buffer that can handle high levels of fear without destroying the connection, twin flames lack this protective space. As a result, even small amounts of fear within a twin flame connection become overwhelming and crippling since it has nowhere to dissipate. Think of it this way. A soul with low energetic resonance to yours wouldn't be able to sustain intense fear-based energy. You simply wouldn't feel emotionally affected because there's not enough energetic attraction. Meanwhile, a twin flame connection can't handle intense fear-based energy because you share the exact same energy frequency. Something as simple as a period of no contact can cause an obsessive state of mind unlike anything else. And that's with just a tiny amount of fear-based energy. With more toxic dynamics, you literally wouldn't be able to function. It could trigger a psychological breakdown. This is why a twin flame relationship cannot sustain abuse or toxicity, which is one of the key differences between twin flames and narcissistic connections. While there might be periods of ghosting, limited communication, or feelings of being led on, examining the actual events and interactions reveals that they aren't truly toxic or abusive. Though the emotions may feel intense, the underlying behaviors lack the hallmarks of genuine toxicity or abuse. So, what exactly are narcissism and codependency? Let's start with narcissism. At its core, narcissism happens when someone's ego gets inflated by putting others down. It's all about gaining a sense of superiority by diminishing someone else. While we all experience this to some degree, it becomes truly problematic when it gains unstoppable momentum, manifesting as toxic or abusive patterns toward others, deliberately keeping them disoriented for the narcissist's entertainment and control. On the flip side, Codependency is when someone derives their sense of self-worth by manipulating others' emotions through self-diminishing behavior or victimization. A codependent person might puff up people's egos, playing on their need to feel superior, alternating between praising them and degrading themselves. Then they use that inflated sense of superiority to manipulate others into doing what they want. They do this by playing the victim, using self-deprecation or guilt to control the other person, often avoiding responsibility, seeking pity, or pulling on people's heartstrings. It's important to note that many of these behaviors are not deliberate or conscious. They often stem from subconscious patterns that result from trauma and programmed behavioral patterns. When narcissists meet a codependent person, they thrive on this dynamic because it feeds their need for control and validation. These dynamics can get extremely toxic and abusive to the point of violence, if unchecked. Even though it seems like they're at odds with each other, they actually work together seamlessly. The problem is that both narcissism and codependency are expressions of fear, not love. The journey of the soul is about moving from fear to love. A key step in that process is becoming aware of what's going on. This is where karmic relationships come in, members of your soul family who show up in your life to help you work through these dynamics. Narcissists attract codependent people to play the other side of the dynamic, and vice versa. These relationships can be really intense and toxic, but sometimes manifest more subtly, becoming tolerable even. People might live entire lives in situations they don't enjoy but simply put up with. Much of the general dissatisfaction in life comes from being stuck in these patterns. When these dynamics play out intensely, it's actually part of raising your consciousness. When closer members of your soul family show up, they allow these patterns to surface in a more powerful and dramatic way. Often, things spiral out of control, and the experience can be really negative. Sometimes, the fallout from these relationships sticks around even after the relationship ends. Things like custody battles, financial wipeouts, or even physical violence and abuse. None of this is fun or easy. Spiritual evolution isn't just some abstract concept, it's real life. And when these dynamics play out, they do so in very real, practical ways. These patterns help us transcend the whole karmic loop by pushing things to such an extreme that you finally say, "Enough is enough, I'm ready for something better." As they say in the Tao, being sick and tired isn't the solution. But being sick and tired of being sick and tired is what pushes you to find a way out. And that's what leads to the next phase of evolution. #. So if these karmic relationships can get so messy and painful, what happens when we finally move past them? What's waiting for us on the other side of all these tough lessons? That's where dharmic relationships come in. Now, let's shift gears and talk about soulmates, specifically soulmates in the context of dharmic-style relationships. As we start breaking free from those karmic patterns, a whole new kind of connection starts opening up. But just so you know, this doesn't happen overnight. Moving out of karmic cycles isn't like flipping a switch where one day you're suddenly done with them. Instead, it's more of a gradual process, and it's not like they ever truly stop completely. Now, as you become more aware that these karmic patterns aren't serving you, you start to phase out of them and move into what we call dharmic connections. To a large extent, we already have dharmic connections in our lives. Many of the key relationships we experience, especially within families, are largely dharmic or soulmate connections. For example, in most families, you see healthy dynamics at play. Sure, they're not always perfect, but generally speaking, parents or guardians take care of their kids, and siblings, despite occasional rivalries, tend to look out for each other. This support system lasts from childhood all the way into old age. These kinds of relationships are dharmic in nature. They follow positive patterns that help us grow spiritually while also supporting us in our everyday lives. So, what exactly are soulmates? Soulmates are members of your soul family. In many ways, these connections can feel even closer than some karmic ones, though karmic relationships can also be intense. Soulmates are souls you've likely been connected to across many lifetimes, playing different roles with each other. One lifetime, you might be siblings. The next, parent and child, then cousins, spouses, or even close friends. Over time, these roles keep shifting and recycling. Think of it like a rope twisted around itself, sometimes tighter, sometimes looser, but always interconnected. You might even encounter situations where someone who was very close to you in a past life, or will be in a future one, shows up in your current life with an inexplicable bond. There's no need to overanalyze it, the connection just feels strong and natural. For instance, I've met people who, on the surface, seem to come into my life randomly. Maybe we crossed paths while shopping, then spontaneously spent the whole day working on something together, and then never spoke again in this lifetime. Yet, the impact of that brief interaction ended up being critical to my life experience. And you know when you're in the middle of these things. You're just going with it. You're not even really asking yourself who this person is or why you get along so well. It just seems effortless and natural. Or there are times when I've had a sense that I was going to meet someone, and when I did, it led to a chain of events that significantly affected not only me but also others around us. These moments often happen without much planning or discussion. They just unfold naturally. These deep connections are what we typically call high-level soulmates. Unfortunately, they're often confused with what people refer to as false twin flames, which is unfortunate because high-level soulmates are truly special. The confusion arises when we try to rank spiritual connections, making some seem more desirable than others. This ranking comes from the ego's need to classify and elevate itself. This tendency can turn something profound into something negative, taking away from the richness that all these connections offer. In practical terms, soulmate connections are often the kind of relationships you want in your day-to-day life, especially when it comes to things like marriage, family, or building a stable life. Twin flame dynamics, as we discussed earlier, tend to be far more intense and don't always align with societal norms or expectations. For instance, twin flame connections often involve age gaps, socioeconomic differences, and existing marriages. Navigating these real-world obstacles requires a completely different mindset. These challenges can't simply be brushed aside or processed through conventional means, especially given society's typical understanding and approaches, whether in psychology or even spiritual discussions. If you're trying to decide whether to go down the path of twin flame union as your primary partnership, or go the more conventional route with a soulmate, there's no right or wrong answer. It's about looking inward, being honest with yourself, and figuring out what you truly desire. Start by thinking about it broadly, and as you reflect more, your path will crystallize based on your preferences and what feels right for you. When we talk about dharmic relationships, we're referring to connections that generally have a positive trajectory. These relationships operate in healthier ways, both in how they function and how they're expressed in the physical world. They're not driven by toxic or fear-based thinking, what some might call 3D dynamics, but are instead rooted in healthier, higher vibrational patterns, what we could call 5D dynamics. This doesn't mean you'll be walking around talking about telepathic communication or anything like that, but you'll notice many intuitive interactions, synchronicities, coincidences, and moments where you just know what the other person is thinking or feeling without them saying a word. Often these insights are confirmed and validated, though that isn't necessary. You might hear them describe a situation you're experiencing, or plans you haven't told anyone about, even if they aren't consciously aware of what they're picking up on. These moments typically begin subtly but become more pronounced over time. Navigating the dharmic path is about learning to align with the art of allowing, rather than clinging to rigid systems or societal expectations. It's about letting go of control and compliance with external structures, and instead trusting the flow of life. That's the essence of dharmic relationships. They help you grow, evolve, and live in greater alignment with your true self. But hang on, if we're trying to grow beyond all these karmic patterns into something better, why do we keep getting pulled back into the same old drama? There's actually a pretty eye-opening reason for this. There's something about narcissistic and codependent patterns that most people miss completely, and this hidden piece explains why so many of us keep struggling with the same issues, even when we totally get what's happening on paper. Alright, let's circle back to narcissistic and codependent dynamics for a moment. There's something important we need to address, and it has to do with how society tends to get it backward. It's not just about the behaviors themselves, it's about the way we frame them as a whole. Even when we try to explore the truth of what's really going on, solutions based on outdated logic can actually lead us into worse situations. A lot of this comes down to perspective. From the ego's point of view, narcissism and codependency are bad things. But here's the catch. Everyone engages in these patterns because they get something out of them. This creates an internal conflict. You might know it's unhealthy or damaging, but you still do it because it feels good, or at least it gives you some kind of payoff. That's the ego's way of operating. It chases short-term gains, even if they come at a long-term cost. This dynamic creates toxic cycles, patterns of bad communication, passive-aggressive behavior, or even outright aggression, both verbal and sometimes physical. These are all expressions of fear, dense and heavy manifestations of a fear-based energetic state. When viewed through the lens of the ego, these patterns become dramatic and chaotic. We fixate on the details: who said what, who did what, when it happened, and why. The denser and more tangled the situation, the more fuel there is to feed the fire. And the ego loves this. It thrives on drama, rolling around in it, staying stuck in the cycle. For those who haven't yet awakened, or whose souls aren't pushing them toward higher consciousness, there's often a level of tolerance for these patterns. Even though you don't like them, they feel normal, so you learn to live with them. But then something shifts. This is where karmic relationships come in. Your soul begins to elevate, and these relationships are often the first step in that process. Counterintuitively, this is when things tend to get worse before they get better. You might find yourself in deeply toxic dynamics with people you can't seem to break free from. Think of the celebrity stories where someone keeps returning to an abusive partner, or the abuser apologizes, cries genuine tears, and claims they don't know why they keep repeating the same harmful behaviors. These are karmic soul family members, and their role is orchestrated at the soul level. These are like soul contracts you've agreed on some level to come together in this lifetime to work through these issues. These dynamics often show up in family relationships. Many people who are starting their spiritual journey find themselves dealing with difficult family situations. Their family members or caretakers might create uncomfortable or undermining environments. This is especially common during the dark night of the soul, which often extends beyond just separation from your twin flame. During these times, people frequently face challenging family dynamics, personal and family health issues, drastic self-sabotage, workplace toxicity, and family narcissism, among other difficult situations. These types of issues are especially pronounced within the elect, or what's commonly understood as the 144,000. What's interesting is that these issues can suddenly appear in relationships that were previously peaceful. This works by bringing patterns to the surface, making them glaringly obvious so you can see how insane or destructive they are and begin to shift. And insane is not used here hyperbolically. These patterns and their underlying energetic causes are simply disconnected from sanity or a balanced mind. These thoughts and energetic patterns have been learned through conditioning and operate in the subconscious. They need to be brought to attention so they can be released. We'll talk about this in more detail later in the video. In many ways, this mirrors what happens during the dark night of the soul in twin flame journeys. But when we're talking about karmic cycles, it's a denser, more intense process. These kinds of dense, fear-based patterns can't be resolved within a twin flame connection, at least not without causing a complete breakdown. Attempting to purify these dense patterns within a twin flame connection is like trying to filter muddy water for drinking. You must first remove the heavy sediment before you can refine the clearer water that remains. It's important to note that we're not talking about this in terms of chronological order. You don't simply go through one phase and then move to the next. These are different energies that exist in different areas of your life. Once you've cleared those dense negative energies, you begin to move into lighter dharmic patterns. Again, this isn't a sequence of steps. These are different energies that manifest simultaneously in different areas of your life. This is similar to the broader journey with twin flames. It's all part of one universal path. As you shed those heavy vibrational elements from your energy field, you transition into healthier dharmic-based relationships with members of your soul family. Sometimes these are the same people because really it's not about them changing, but about you changing. Other times, it's new members of your soul family, stepping in to reflect your evolving vibration. It's important to note that cutting ties with toxic individuals doesn't automatically mean you'll find positive dharmic relationships. Sometimes, relationships are so toxic that you need to cut ties for your own safety and well-being to begin the work. But if you're still vibrating at the same frequency, you'll simply recreate the same dynamics with a different group of soul family members. Remember, whether we're talking about karmic or dharmic connections, these are all souls closely related to you. What they reflect isn't about how close or distant you are from them. It's about what's in your vibrational field. Your soul family will always mirror that back to you. We've been looking at all this stuff from our human point of view, but there's another angle that changes everything. When we start seeing things through our soul's eyes, this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. It all comes down to your energetic field and how you manage it. This ties directly into what we've been discussing about the twin flame journey, because at the end of the day, the main difference between twin flames and other members of your soul family is the level of closeness. When you're dealing with a soul family member, you're interacting with an individual soul that's separate from your own. But with a twin flame, you're dealing with someone who isn't another soul. They're the other side of your energetic field. They're the same as you energetically, just the opposite polarity. Because of this, many of the patterns we've talked about with soul families apply to twin flames as well. For example, the idea that no matter where you are, there you are, that your external reality reflects your internal state, is true for both. The key difference is that with your twin flame, there's no wiggle room. There's no space to hide or avoid what's coming up for you because the connection is so direct and intense. Within your soul family, there are varying degrees of closeness. You have high-level soulmates who feel incredibly connected, and then you have more distant connections, souls who are still tied to you but perhaps in less significant ways. Some souls might not even feel like they're part of your soul family at all, even though they're still connected to you energetically. But with your twin flame, it's different. It's not another soul, it's the most direct version of you. It's like looking into a mirror that reflects not just your personality, but your entire energetic essence. The real shift here is moving from a karmic state, where we're reacting, operating from the ego's perspective, to a dharmic state, where we're viewing life from the soul's perspective. When you make this shift, everything changes. Your understanding of soul family dynamics shifts. Your view of karmic relationships transforms. Even your perspective on dharmic relationships and twin flames themselves becomes deeper and clearer. This is where intuition becomes important. It's not about intellectual concepts, labels, or specific terms. Those things can help point you in the right direction, but they can't give you true understanding. Real understanding comes from within. For example, if you try to explain the color red to someone who's blind, they might nod and say, "Okay, I think I get it," but they'll never truly grasp it through words alone. On the other hand, if you explain red to someone who already knows what it is, they don't need the explanation. They just recognize it when they hear it. It's the same with these spiritual concepts. Deep down, your intuition already knows all of this. The challenge is that our understanding of these truths is at different stages of development. No amount of explaining can force anyone to understand something they're not ready to grasp. But we can resonate with ideas that align with what we already sense to be true. That's why hearing these concepts expressed can be helpful, not to teach or explain, but to provide touchstones that deepen our connection with our own inner knowing. When it comes to soul family members, twin flames, and all these dynamics, what we're really talking about is a shifting of perspective. You already know what this feels like. You already understand it on some level. Hearing it explained simply helps you tune into that knowing a little more clearly. It's not about learning something new. It's about remembering what you already know. This whole different way of seeing things brings up a big question. How do we actually tell the difference between a twin flame and someone who's just really close in our soul family? The answers are both simpler and deeper than most people think. A lot of people who think they've found their twin flame are actually experiencing something completely different. But how can you really know? It's not about ticking boxes on some twin flame checklist, it goes way deeper than that. Let's circle back to twin flames and how they fit into the bigger picture, especially when we talk about different levels of density. A lot of humanity is still pretty deep in 3D energy, meaning we're operating from fear, ego, and dense physical expressions of energy. At this stage, the twin flame dynamic isn't always the most helpful or constructive relationship to dive into. Instead, many people would benefit more from working through karmic relationships or connecting with members of their soul family. These relationships give you space to grow and heal without the overwhelming intensity that comes with twin flames. That said, understanding the twin flame dynamic can still be a powerful way to look at larger patterns in the human collective. On a big picture level, we're all part of one unified source, one flame. And within that unity, there's a polarity at play, the masculine and feminine energies. This isn't just about individual relationships, it shows up everywhere, in governments, nations, societies, and even in everyday roles like employer and employee. It's especially clear in how we form partnerships and families, which are where most of life's interactions happen. Even within the twin flame journey, dynamics like the honeymoon phase, the dark night of the soul, the runner-chaser dynamic, and eventual union aren't exclusive to twin flames. You can experience similar stages with high-level soulmates or other members of your soul family. The difference is in the intensity and how much choice you have in the process. With soulmates, energetic exchanges have more wiggle room, especially when we're talking about fear-based energy. The doubt and emotional turmoil won't feel as consuming, and over time, it'll fade. You might go through weeks or months thinking about them intensely, but it fades bit by bit each day until life moves on. Eventually, you'll think of them only once every couple of months when you encounter an obvious trigger, and even then, you'll look back with little to no emotional response. But with a twin flame, the doubt doesn't fade, it gets louder. It can feel like an internal storm that won't settle until you consciously look right through and see it for what it truly is. This brings us to the big question a lot of people ask: is this person my twin flame? Honestly, the label doesn't matter. What really matters is the energy of the connection. If you're feeling intense emotions, take that as a sign that this situation is important for your soul. From there, you can look at the dynamics to get clarity. One key difference between twin flames and soulmates is the level of intensity and choice. With a soulmate or karmic connection, the bond can feel deep, but it's not all-consuming. While they can trigger you deeply, it takes much more for these triggers to surface. There's space to step back, and with time, the emotional charge diminishes. Eventually, you can move past it, and they will fade from your mind naturally, even without fully understanding the dynamics. If you use the experience for spiritual evolution, you'll gain even more from it. But with a twin flame, there's no stepping back. A connection is relentless. From the moment you meet them until the end of that lifetime, they'll stay in your thoughts every single day. At first, this can feel torturous. This intense state can last for months or even years. But as you grow and shift into alignment with the energy, it transforms, though it never goes away. The lack of choice is another big difference. With soulmates or other soul family members, you can ignore the connection, and it'll eventually fade. But with a twin flame, ignoring it isn't an option. It won't go away, no matter how hard you try. And while that might sound overwhelming, it's actually good news. If you're unsure whether someone is your twin flame, don't stress. If it's not a twin flame connection, the intensity will naturally subside, and you'll move on. But if it is a twin flame, you'll know because the connection won't leave you, it's permanent. In essence, a soulmate gives you an opportunity to move into dharma and transcend old patterns. It's a chance to grow, but you can also choose to stay asleep and let the lesson pass. A twin flame, on the other hand, is a direct tap into your energy field. Once it starts, there's no turning back. The journey might be intense, but it's also transformative, a non-negotiable path toward awakening. Now that we understand these differences, let's talk about one of the most painful questions people ask when they're on this journey. It's the question that really gets to the heart of why this path can hurt so much. The mental and emotional roller coaster of the twin flame journey can be totally overwhelming. A lot of people wonder if they're losing it, but there's actually a reason for all this chaos. This brings us back to a lot of the conversations we've had with people about twin flames. One of the big questions that always comes up is, do the thoughts ever stop? But really, it's not just about the thoughts, it's about the pain that's tied to them. What people are often asking is, will the pain ever stop? But they frame it in terms of the thoughts because the two feel so deeply connected. Here's the deal. With twin flames, the thoughts don't stop. That's just part of the dynamic. With other relationships, like karmic connections or soulmates, if physical contact isn't maintained, the thoughts will eventually fade, and you'll move on. But with twin flames, even if the pain stops, and it can stop, the thoughts don't go away. And let's be clear, it doesn't happen automatically. You have to actively work to stop the pain, but the thoughts, they stay. With karmic relationships or soulmates though, it's different. Let's say you're stuck in a karmic cycle with limerence or intense attachment. Eventually, the thoughts will slow down, fade, and then stop. But you can also work to stop the pain before the thoughts fade completely. But over time, without a physical connection to feed it, you'll move past it. And when you're dealing with something like a narcissistic dynamic, the key is detoxifying yourself from that relationship. This doesn't mean running away out of fear or searching for something better. It's not about escaping, it's about taking care of yourself, making sure you're in a good situation, and living in a way that supports your well-being. The key is to disengage. If the situation isn't one you can immediately walk away from physically, such as with practical living arrangements or family situations, focus on not engaging in activities where unhealthy dynamics occur. It's like the saying that having the upper hand means nothing if you don't have anyone to hold it. That's all that needs to be done with karmic cycles. Recognize and disengage. If you have the upper hand and you're winning, that's not really winning because the whole game is a losing game. If you have the weaker position, you're actually in a better spot because you can more easily shift to the true winning game. The key is to stop thinking that you can turn it around and eventually win in a losing game. It's like they say in Conversations with God, "Behold the darkness and do not curse it, yet be a light unto the darkness, thereby transforming it." This means being aware while maintaining your internal balance, not trying to respond, react, escape, or fix the situation. Instead of getting stuck in feeling that the situation is bad, you reach a place internally where you can observe without getting wrapped up in that energy. That's when you truly tap into your soul's frequency in the most powerful way, a connection that nothing else can match. When you do this, when you focus on your own well-being and evolution, the lingering energetic feelings might still hang around for a while, but they'll fizzle out over time. If you actively work on detoxifying that energy, it'll happen even faster. At the end of the day, all of this ties back to our soul's journey through evolution. It's about living authentically, following your true inner guidance, and becoming the most magnificent version of yourself that you are capable of realizing in each moment of now. Not just in the big, flashy ways like career success or societal milestones, but in the small, everyday moments. It's about the love and intention you put into even the simplest things, like wiping off a counter or folding laundry. It's being able to look around at your life, no matter how ordinary the moment might seem, and see the beauty in it. From there, you keep expanding what you appreciate, finding joy in more and more aspects of life. I've heard it said that it's not about doing great things, it's about doing things in a great way. There's a tendency to start off strong and then let things taper off. But the real magic happens when you take the little things and do them with greatness. When you approach life this way, everything you do becomes bigger, more fulfilling, and deeply satisfying. And as time goes by, you'll eventually find yourself doing things of greater and greater significance. It's about creating a life that feels good, not just in the highlights, but in the everyday moments. It's also about learning to enjoy the good times while recognizing that the tough times are opportunities to tap into the deeper reserves within yourself. For example, think about a moment when you're hungry, and so is your child, but there's only one piece of food. When you hand it to your child, that act of selflessness reveals a deeper level of who you are. These kinds of challenges show us parts of ourselves we wouldn't otherwise experience. So whether it's enjoying the abundance when life is good, or experiencing inner strength and compassion in the hard times, it's about living from this place of authenticity and love in everything you do. It's about appreciating both the plenty and the struggle, knowing that each has something to teach you and something to offer. So if the thoughts about your twin flame never really go away, how do you ever find any peace? How do you actually move toward union? There are two really powerful principles that change everything. Now, before we get into the next section, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you. If you're finding these insights helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps us out. And you know what? If there's someone in your life who you think might benefit from this perspective, don't hesitate to share it with them. We always love hearing your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your questions and insights don't just help us create better content, they remind everyone in this community that we're all walking this path together. Alright, so far in this video, we've looked at the deeper patterns behind these connections. Now let's get really practical. How do you actually deal with all this in your everyday life? Let's break this down again, focusing on two key principles we've talked about in many of our videos: detoxification and magnetization. These are universal principles for well-being. But with twin flames, they're not optional. You have to do them to get to a place where you're not feeling tortured. The only path forward isn't back to being asleep, but toward a place of zen and bliss. That's really the whole point. Your soul is trying to get your attention to move you up to a higher realm of existence. Detoxification is all about releasing the negative triggers that keep pulling you back into unhealthy patterns. It's about creating some healthy distance so your energy field can reset and return to a calmer, more natural state. But here's the thing. With a twin flame connection, physical actions like deleting their number, cutting off mutual friends, or putting up barriers won't sever the bond. They can't sever the bond. Nothing can sever the bond. Those tactics might work with other relationships because as physical time and distance increase, the connection naturally fades away. But with twin flames, that's just not possible. The connection can't be broken through physical means because it's rooted at the soul level. That's why with twin flames, they become the one person who stays constantly in your mind from the moment you meet them until your last breath in this lifetime. They'll be in your thoughts daily, or at least every other day. This is especially noticeable and obvious for those who've had an active twin flame connection for a while. During separation, they'll be the only person, besides those you physically live with, who remains consistently in your thoughts as months and years pass. This persistent presence in your mind is one of the major signs that confirms a twin flame connection, especially when there is no physical interaction. Even high-level soulmate connections fade over time, leading to only occasional thoughts every few weeks. But with a twin flame, the connection remains present day after day. So, detoxification isn't about trying to end the connection. It's about giving yourself space to breathe. You're stepping back to stop triggering yourself, to stop sending covert messages, whether intentional or not, and to clear your mind of those influences for a while. Trust your intuition here. Don't push yourself further than feels right, but go as far as you need to. And don't worry about losing the connection by doing this. This isn't the kind of bond that can be broken. Love transcends all of that. Even if you've said or done things you regret, there's no need to fear it being unforgivable. Twin flame love operates beyond those surface-level mistakes. The goal of detoxification is simply to create enough space for you to heal and stabilize emotionally. Once you've created that space, you move into magnetization. This is where you start aligning with your soul energy and drawing things toward you, including your twin flame. Let's clarify something. This principle applies to high-level soulmates too. If you've had deep connections with members of your soul family across multiple lifetimes, they'll naturally show up in your life when you tap into that shared energy. But with twin flames, it's different because they're not just close to you, they're you. They're the other half of your energetic field, the same soul manifested in two forms. So when you start magnetizing your energy, you're activating that deeper connection, and it's normal for your twin flame to physically manifest in your life as a result. Magnetization happens through practices like meditation, which is one of the most powerful tools you can use. Meditation helps you quiet your mind and step into the seat of the observer, watching what unfolds without expectation or attachment. You can do silent meditation, focus on soothing sounds, or even try body scans, whatever helps you settle into stillness. To support your meditation practice, we've created a new channel called Peaceful Practice, with the link available in the description below. These meditations work for everyone, whether you're on a twin flame journey or not. They're designed to help you grow spiritually and raise your consciousness, which is exactly what the twin flame path is all about. We're working steadily to make these resources available to more people in both the twin flame and general spiritual communities. Another part of magnetization is the content you expose your mind to. When you fill your mind with higher truths, through books, audiobooks, YouTube videos, or any material that resonates with your intuition, you're reshaping your thoughts to hold these higher revelations. This creates space for them to take root in your physical life. As you continue this process, something amazing happens. You start feeling good, not just surface-level happiness, but a deep sense of contentment, peace, and even bliss. You feel enthusiastic about life, not because of anything external, but simply because you're alive. From this place of alignment, your energy begins to attract the experiences and circumstances you truly desire. Good things start happening naturally in your life. You might find more opportunities, better relationships, and an overall sense of well-being. This includes developing a healthy connection with your twin flame in the physical world. When you shift your perspective from the ego's limited view to the soul's expansive understanding, you realize that you and your twin flame are already one. You're not two separate people coming together, you're one soul. As you experience this truth, the two of you naturally align in the physical world, just as you're already united in the spiritual realm. That's really the heart of it. Once you adopt your soul's perspective, everything falls into place. Thanks for tuning in. Take care, stay blessed, and remember, the best is yet to come.